The history of DNA fingerprinting begins in September 1984. Dr. Alec Jeffreys, a geneticist from the University of Leicester in Great Britain, was studying hereditary diseases in families. At the university, he was mainly focused on methods to resolve paternity and immigration disputes. He tried to do this by demonstrating the genetic links between individuals. He used restriction fragment length polymorphism to analyze DNA. He soon discovered that repetitive patterns of DNA were present in all human beings, but they varied in length for each person. He soon realized that this major difference could eventually be used to find the identity of a person. He called this technique genetic fingerprinting. Dr. Jeffrey demonstrated that a genetic fingerprint is specific to each individual person and the pattern does not match anyone else's, excluding identical twins. Dr. Jeffrey's DNA fingerprinting technique would be catapulted into the world of forensic science and change it for the better. When an inked finger is pressed onto paper, the friction ridges on that finger will leave a mark. The friction ridge patterns are grouped into 3 distinct types, which are loops, whorls, and arches, and each with unique variations that depend on the shape and the relationship of the ridges themselves. Loop fingerprints are when the prints recurve onto themselves to essentially form a loop shape, divided into radial loops, which are when they're pointing towards the radius bone or thumb, and ulnar loops, which is when they point towards the pinky. These loops account for approximately 60% of pattern types. Another fingerprint pattern is the whorl pattern. It forms circular and spiral patterns like tiny whirlpools. There are 4 groups of whorls. There are plane, when it's concentric circles, a central pocket loop, which is a loop with a whorl at the end, a double loop, when it's 2 loops that create an S pattern, and an accidental loop, which is irregular shaped. Whorls make up about 35% of pattern types. The third type of fingerprint is an arch fingerprint. It's a wave-like pattern and includes plane arches and tented arches. Tented arches tend to rise to a sharper point than plane arches. Arches make up about 5% of all pattern types. One example of the impact it has made is a case from 1987. Florida's Assistant State's Attorney Tim Berry began working with Forensic Director Michael Baird to figure out how DNA could be used as a form of identification. After a serial rapist terrorized 23 women in Orlando, Florida, Tommy Lee Andrews was caught. He left 2 fingerprints left on a victim's window, and identification by a victim in a lineup, as well as having the same blood type as the one left at each scene, got him caught. It was after 2 trials, during which time Baird had both meticulously been processing the DNA evidence and Berry prepared compelling legal briefs. In the final trial, Andrews complicitly was proven by his DNA. Genetic profiling was admitted for the first time, and DNA began to gain a legal precedence.